Welcome to Beyond the Portrait.
Hello. So today I have a very special episode for you. It is airing on my 40th birthday. I am recording this a few days beforehand. And so I've mentioned on this show before that this podcast is a living time capsule. It's an extension of what I create in a photograph. So today I'd like to speak with you about endings and beginnings. You see, on my 30th birthday, I was an active Mormon, the photography director at Domino magazine, and I had just shot a destination guide in Hawaii. So I celebrated my birthday there, and I was on the verge of a quest that I had no idea what was coming for me. So there's a T.S. Eliot quote that I love. I've loved it for the past several years. So here it is. And to make an end is to make a beginning. And it's about a passage, about a journey. So for me, it has represented one of the most pivotal endings and a beginning. My faith transition and subsequent departure from Mormonism. So today I have two very special guests who will be joining me. One of the greatest gifts I have ever received are these two remarkable women as my friends. We affectionately refer to ourselves as book club. We met through going to church together in New York City on the Upper East Side, and I'm sure you've heard of the Book of Mormon, though our nickname was not from that originally, but I do enjoy that juxtaposition. Anyway, today we will be discussing our faith transitions out of the church, something that we did independently of each other, but thankfully we ended up being able to share in that process together. If this is your first time joining me, I wanted to share a little bit of a recap with some additional context. So I was born in the church to active and believing members. The official name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS Church. A lot of people refer to the members of this church as Mormons. But I was born in California. Both of my parents were born in the church on both sides, and my grandparents were a mix of converts and generational Mormons with pioneer stock. So my parents divorced when I was 5. So at the time, this is the 80s, that was pretty unusual, and it was not very common. So I think because of that, it really informed my perspective on what being a believer who didn't quite fit the typical Mormon mold felt like. It showed up a lot in my childhood, as Mormons do tend to try to decipher what kind of Mormon you are and how obedient and faithful. Like, for example, because I had a single mother, a lot of children, they weren't allowed to play with us because we had a single mom. That kind of thing impacts how you're accepted into the group, or not accepted in a lot of times in my case. So I lived with my mother and my brother, and we moved to Utah right before I turned 9. And yes, there is a difference between Utah Mormons, Mormons in the United States, and Mormons across the world. So my childhood was a very unstable one, which is why I think I leaned on the church's teachings and worldview so much. I did start questioning the truthfulness probably about 8 years old, which is, for those who don't know, the age when you're baptized. I remember questioning how the LDS church was the only true church. And I remember talking to my dad about that, and he was pretty upset that I was even wondering about that, probably because I had just been baptized. But subsequently, I grew into my teens and more of the issues started to surface. Primarily women's rights and the patriarchy and a lot of the racist teachings of the church and doctrines. My family and the leaders in the church always had an explanation for these, and often I was met with anger or scolding. So I learned to shut down my concerns, and I trusted them. They're my family and they were older than me, and I carried on, and I learned to really rely on my faith and would lean on it in times of difficulty, of which there were many instances in my case. So by the time I was 26, I was at a crossroads and I decided to move to New York. I was an active believing Mormon in New York for several years. I met so many incredible, beautiful people when I moved here. I worked in the interior design magazines, and I met people of all walks of life, of belief, of perspectives, people I never would have had access to living in Utah. And I attribute much of that gratitude to photography and the gift that it has given me. It has opened my eyes. I was really struggling with some of the issues that I had tried to justify in the past. And I was an active member for about 5 years, 4.5, 5 years living in New York, that I kept leaning into some of those skills that I learned growing up. However, a little over a month after my 31st birthday, November 5th, 2015 to be exact, because I have this thing about dates. I always remember dates. There was an edict that had come out from the leadership of the church. Most refer to it as the November 5th policy, and it forbade any child of a same-sex couple to be baptized until they were 18. And they'd have to disavow their parents, and those parents would also be excommunicated for apostasy. So my heart just broke. For years, I had used the cognitive dissonance skills that I had learned in my youth. And finally, the weight became too heavy. My quote unquote shelf broke, a term that many former Mormons use. You learn to outsource your power. You are taught that for things you don't understand, to mentally file it away in a box and put it on a shelf. Until for some of us, that shelf gets too heavy and it collapses, which is my situation. So this is a chapter of my story, of a beginning of coming home to myself. It's also a story of two of my very dearest friends and their experiences along this shared experience. They have known so many versions of me and of the messy and the ugly, and have loved me and have been there for me just the same. I'd also like to preface that at the time of our faith transitions, we were single and we are cis hetero women who are working professionals in the New York tri-state area. So what that means is we have a very specific experience that may or may not represent another's experience. And we also had the freedom to make choices for ourselves without it impacting our livelihoods, our partners and children, etc. Not everybody has the same options or the same support systems. And so I want to acknowledge that, because I know that that is not the case for a lot of Mormons, and we were lucky in that way. A couple of terms you are going to hear on this episode: ex-Mormon, ex-Mo. Those terms refer to people who have left the church. Some people refer to ex-Mormons as former Mormons or apostates. That is the case for my friends and I. You will hear the term never-Mo. That is a jargon term that usually only people who've left the church would use. People who are believing members of the church, they would say a non-member. When you are an active member, you would say active. If you are someone who is still on the records but doesn't really attend church anymore, you would say inactive. Never-Mo is someone who's never been a member and is not someone who's left the church. BYU is another term you're going to hear. That stands for Brigham Young University. That is the university that a lot of Mormons will go to. All three of us went to that school. You'll also hear us talking about the word of wisdom. So the word of wisdom is a set of lifestyle choices that is part of the requirement of being a Mormon in the church. So it's from the Doctrine and Covenants, which is one of the scriptures that Mormons use. So Mormons use the Book of Mormon, and they use the Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price. Those are specific to Mormons. And then Mormons also believe in the Bible, so the Old Testament and the New Testament. You'll also hear the term celestial kingdom. Mormons don't really believe in heaven and hell necessarily. So you've got the celestial kingdom, the telestial kingdom, and the terrestrial kingdom. The celestial kingdom is the highest level that you can achieve, and there's also multiple levels in the celestial kingdom. So we refer to the celestial kingdom in the episode because in order to be sealed and saved to live with your family forever, which is one of the doctrines, you have to be married and sealed, and that's the only way that you could reach the highest level of the celestial kingdom. If you are unmarried, you will not reach the highest level. You can still be in the celestial kingdom, but you would not reach the highest level. You'll also hear the term singles ward and family ward. A ward is what people refer to as the church that they go to, like the location. A singles ward is for unmarried Mormons who are between the ages of 18 and 30. Generally, it's usually called a young single adults ward. And then a family ward is for everybody else. So I met Laura and April at a singles ward in New York City. Without further ado, my friends April and Laura, this is Book Club. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday school.
Cheers.
Cheers.
As usual, I'm late.
I mean, I feel like I'm the teacher and I'm always late, so big surprise. So I'm having everybody introduce themselves, use your, like, what your pronouns are, your name, and where people, like, where you live, and a little bit about you.
I'm April. Pronouns are she, her, and I live in New York City, and I'm from California originally.
And I'm Laura, pronouns she, her, and I live in New Jersey, used to live in New York, and I'm originally from Washington State.
Perfect. Well, I am so excited about today's episode, and I think it's going to be really fun because not everybody understands kind of this type of life. And what I love about you two in particular, and I might get emotional like a little bit throughout this episode because I don't really have people that have known me for all of the versions of myself. And so for the listener, to give a little background, I met April and Laura when I moved to New York, and I had I wasn't sure which ward to go to. And so for people who don't know what a ward is, that's kind of the neighborhood designation that you're assigned. So like wherever you live, they put you in a grouping and that's where you go to church. And so I had gone to the temple to go to one of the singles wards, and a singles ward is for people who are 18 to 30. And so I had gone to Lincoln Center because they have a ward house in a temple. And I had run into somebody that I had gone to school with at BYU. And she's like, oh, I'm like, come to this ward. It's cool. People are fun. She's like, the East Side, that's where people actually just want to go to church. And in my mind, I was like, well, that's the church for me. So I like, when I was looking for apartments, I looked specifically for the East Side. And so that's where I met my dear friends, April and Laura. And we have been friends now way, way longer out of the church than we were in the church. But it's, I think, such a special friendship that we have, because how many people in your life have seen you completely tear your identity down and build it back up and stay friends? So, and to be a support of each other. And what's special about our relationship is like, we're very like evolution forward. So it's like we're here for each other's growth and we support each other. And anyway, I just love you both so, so much. And so I'm really honored.
It's like wild how we're like totally different people than we were when we first met.
Yeah, we are completely different. And it's like, and it's funny. And, you know, it's like, so this episode is going to air on my 40th birthday, which is in about a week and a half. And it's just, it's bananas. Like I met you guys when I was 26. We were babies. So I think to get started, I want both of you to kind of talk about like how you kind of grew up in the church and a little bit about that, and then kind of just some kind of key pieces of like what that meant for you and for your identity. So who wants to go first?
So I grew up in a mixed religion family, actually. My dad is Buddhist. So my parents are both immigrants from Korea. My dad grew up going to the Buddhist temple with his mom. And then still practices, not really like very intently, but or intensely, but he does like his own individual practice at home. My mom grew up in a Catholic family, actually, and then when she's a teenager, had some friends in Korea who were Mormons and invited her to church. She met the missionaries and eventually converted. Wasn't super active in the church, but when my parents moved over to the U.S., I think that actually the Mormon church became kind of a community for her. It's where she had a lot of friends and was able to kind of integrate into American culture a little bit better. So we grew up going to church with my mom, and then my dad considered converting at one point, but never really did. And so over time, I think I ended up actually being kind of the most devout one. Maybe it has to do with partly me being like eldest daughter, but I felt like a lot of responsibility to stay as the most active member of my family. I felt like I was supposed to like anchor everyone back in. So my siblings actually had all left. I think my mom is more like non-denominational Christian at this point. But it was just me for a while and I stayed pretty active. I'm still like mind blown that I actually stayed active all through like graduate school and living in New York City. But then I met you guys and eventually made my way out.
My family, it always starts with our families, right? My family is also kind of mixed faith in a way. Like my immediate family, I grew up, my mom and dad were both Mormon growing up, and we went to church together. My mom's family had converted when she was like 10 years old because there was a family that her family used to go water skiing with that invited them to church. So, you know, that kind of community building the invitation is always what brings you in. But yeah, so my mom's family is like about half and half Mormon, and then my dad's family was all like Mormon pioneers from like the 1800s had come over, had been converted in England, I think. So that side was like very devout, but also I'm not as close to that side of my family. So I kind of grew up. Um, it's funny because I'm the youngest in my family and had like an opposite like experience, but a similar sense of responsibility. I was the youngest in my family, but also like the least, like my siblings were all very kind of rebellious. And so I was always like the good kid. And I think you like really attach to those kinds of identities. So while my older siblings were, doing all kinds of cool teenager things that were not like kosher, I felt like, oh, like I've got to like hold down the fort. Like I've got to be the one who like does all the right things. I think that was a lot of kind of what kept me in the church, but also my mom got divorced 3 times before I was 12. So we had just a lot of instability and things like that. So we were moving back and forth. I know Brittany had some things like that too. And I think for me, the church was a really stable place. It was a place where I had a sense of community, where I had like, I knew what I was doing. I knew that people, I'm going to get emotional during this too.
Yeah.
But I knew that people would be there for me, like pretty consistently. Like I knew that people, that was like kind of their job. And I think as members, as we were really members in the church, that was our job to like make people feel that sense of community too, and to make people feel loved and needed. And so I think that was probably like, it's one of those things I think about a lot. Like, why did I stay for so long? Because I stayed up until I was like almost, I think I was about 30. And so, and then it's funny, I had moved in with Laura. We were roommates in like 2014, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah, and I'd been living with a friend who was not Mormon, who was like my dear friend Melissa, who I love. But she had started drinking more, like, and I was like, oh, like I don't know, like if this is like the right environment for me to be around as like a person who's like really trying to like connect with my faith, which I think was probably just me realizing that I was already on maybe some rocky ground. So I was like, oh, I'll move in with my really good Mormon friends, Laura and Jess. And
now we all drink together.
and it went really well.
It went really well.
I love that. That's really cute. Like, no, if we're like all slightly hungover this morning.
Yeah, exactly. With our double juice. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like that is the thing. Like all three of us had like we had felt like outsiders in some capacity, and so the church kind of gave us a foundation. The church kind of gave us stability. And I think, when I was thinking about this as a conversation, there is a narrative and about people who leave Mormonism by believers. And a lot of believers think that it's because you want to sin. It's because you aren't faithful enough that you can't hack it. And that's just frankly not true. And I think that I know a lot of ex-Mormons, and the majority of them left because of their own integrity. But I think, people kind of just like latch on to things like coffee or whatever. And it's like, that's not why we left. Like all of us were practicing faithful Mormons in New York City for years. And like, that's not why we left the church. So,
Yeah, I think that one of the funny things that I've noticed about a lot of people who leave the church is that they actually, a lot of them don't even, you would think like, oh, I left the church, so I'm going to go start like party, drinking and stuff. But there's almost this lag period actually for a lot of people. And I didn't even start drinking for a while, I think. But it's, I think that there's a lot of people who kind of outgrow the church. Actually, it's this weird thing where like you try so hard to be a good follower of Christ, and then as you're doing this, it like naturally just leads you out of like the Mormon teachings, almost like leads you out of the Mormon church.
100%. No, it is the integrity that was instilled in me as a Mormon that is why I left, because when I realized it was not true, my integrity could not leave me in it because of the harm it was causing. I mean, you guys know, but it's like, I remember like so for the listeners, we actually didn't talk about our faith transitions like at the time we were going through them. And I think that what's really interesting is like there's so much shame when you are like when you're starting to like doubt because here's the thing. So like you guys know this and we're going to talk about this, but it's like, but there's so much rhetoric about doubting. So they say doubt your doubts, or they're like they invite you to pray for yourself, but then if the answer is not what they want you to think, then they say try again. So you learn skills on how to brainwash yourself. So when you start doubting, there is a lot of shame. So I remember when I told April, I was like, I have something to tell you. I was like, it was really hard. Like it was just dinner, the two of us, and I was really nervous. I was like, I don't know if she's gonna be my friend anymore. I don't know what's gonna happen. Like I was like really, really nervous. And so I was like, but my integrity, I could not be a member anymore. And so I told you, because at that point you guys had moved to Brooklyn. So we weren't going to church together anymore. I was still on the east side. And my faith transition just happened to line up for when I aged out of the singles ward. And so I was like already going to have to go to the family ward anyway, but that was, coming up. But it was interesting because I sat you down and I was like, I have something to tell you. And I was like, I think the church isn't true and I'm not going to be a Mormon anymore. And you're like, oh yeah, me too. And I was like, wait, what? But we hadn't talked about it.
No, we hadn't talked about it. It's funny. I don't even remember it. Like, I don't remember this conversation because it was I think I had already, I know, but I've had similar ones. Yeah. I've had similar conversations with people where I like went in feeling like, oh my gosh, like this person is going to think I'm evil now. And it's like really hard.
This is funny because I actually had not heard this story. Like what's even more wild though is that April and I lived together.
Yeah.
And you guys
were like doing this like secretly, separately.
Yeah, we were I think all three of us were separately leaving the church. But I think part of it was like I actually didn't want to be a bad influence on other people. So then I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep this to myself. And then at some point, I don't even remember. I think that maybe I asked, or I was like, hey, how's church going or something? And it turned out like all of us had left within the past, within the previous 6 months or something.
Yeah, like it was crazy. It was all at the same time, it's like, but it wasn't peer pressure. It wasn't because we were trying to party or, it's like going back to, so for people who don't know, Mormons can't drink caffeinated teas. So like green teas or black teas. Some people are okay with herbal teas. It's not really caffeine as the issue. It's people drink Diet Coke like it's water. So that's not really the problem, but you don't drink, tea, and you don't drink coffee, and you don't drink alcohol. When I first left the church, it took me 5 months before I was willing to break the word of wisdom intentionally. And it was green tea in Japan. I had to leave the country to try green tea. That was the first time I could do it. And I literally had a panic attack. And then once I did it, and I really thought and I already knew that the church wasn't true, but it's but the amount of brainwashing and the conditioning, literally my body was like, what's going to happen? Am I going to feel invaded by spirits? Am I going to feel evil? And I felt totally fine. And then I had coffee and a wine spritzer in New Orleans, a couple weeks after that. And for one, the coffee, I was like, where has this been my whole life? It is a gift from the gods. It's I love it. And then it was funny because with alcohol, it was a wine spritzer. And I was like, am I drunk? Am I drunk? Am I drunk? And the people that were with me are like, you're fine. And I was like, but I felt totally fine. And it's just the amount of it's so stupid. It's so stupid. But how was that for you guys?
So it's funny because I've I went through all of grad school, not drinking coffee. And I still look back. I've talked to other people who also are former Mormons and also in my profession of dentistry. And we all joke. We're like, how much better would we have done in school? We would have been top of the class if we were drinking coffee at the time. But it was just I remember when I started drinking coffee, I was like, this is amazing. Where has this been my whole life?
Totally. I know. And the amount of Diet Coke was like not good for us. Like I was drinking like 2 liters
It
a
was
day.
terrible.
Like,
Yeah,
you know, it's
A
same.
like,
lot. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it did
It was a
nothing. It
ton.
did nothing for me.
No.
no. What
No.
about you, April?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I think I was trying to think like when I really started drinking, and it was like, it's funny because yeah, we were living together. It was a very personal choice to leave. Like we had to, I think we all had to reach that on our own. But but yeah, I think it was probably about 6 months after I left that I started like trying, like I think I had like a whiskey ginger or something like that out with friends. But I don't.
You
It's funny
started
because
with
this
the
is a
hard
totally
stuff, honey.
yeah, I know. It was ginger ale. It's fine. Just
With
a little
whiskey in
whiskey.
it.
Just a little. Oh, I think I'd tried red wine and I thought it tasted like nail polish remover and like acetone. I don't feel that way anymore.
No, that's now your favorite, though.
Yeah, I do love a red wine. But yeah, no, I think it was a weird transition for me because like I think it was more like normalizing within my other groups of friends, and it was like kind of a slow transition kind of, and I think as we had to figure out in all parts of our lives, like figuring out like, oh, what does this mean for me, like is this something that I do, like I don't know who I am outside of Mormonism, so I have to figure out like, do I get drunk, do I whatever. And I think for the first like 6 months of drinking I didn't really get drunk. I think my body didn't know how to metabolize it yet. So it was like,
Fresh liver.
yeah, my liver was so fresh that it was like, oh, this is fine. We can do this. And I remember I went to Greece with a group of friends. And we were like on Mykonos at some club and everyone was doing shots, and I got us all home, and I was the one who, like, despite having also done shots all night, was like the one who was still functioning. And I was like, I don't know why everyone's passed out. So it was a really weird time, like for my body and for my mind. So yeah, but yeah, it was an interesting thing. And I don't think I felt, by the time I started drinking, I think I had gotten already to a point where I didn't feel guilty about it. It was more like, I just don't know who I am.
Yeah. I definitely went through a similar realization of like, oh man, my liver is I feel like my liver aged pretty fast. So the tolerance is no longer there. But I do remember like one of the things I was so surprised to find was that I don't get the Asian glow. Like so you see like most a lot of Asians will turn super red when they drink, and I was always really terrified that I might have this. But like I remember I started drinking and I was like, I don't get glow. Like I was gifted this whole time and no one told me.
Oh, what a waste.
Such a waste.
No, I feel that about my boobs. It's like when they were like in their prime, nobody got to see them.
Also
but I mean, but it was funny because, you know, I mean, I don't think people realize like if you grow up around certain things, like you know how to order things. And I remember when I first went to Starbucks, like I didn't know how to do anything.
Oh,
and,
yes.
Yeah, like one of my not like Nevermo friends, like when I first told her that I was leaving the church, for one, she was silent on the phone for 5 minutes and she didn't say anything. And then the first thing she said was, when are we going to go drink? And, you know, it's like, because and I was like, okay. But she was like, I never thought this day would come. And I think, you know, so for people who don't know us, it's like we were super faithful. Like I was the gospel doctrine teacher of our ward. Like April was in the Relief Society presidency for some of the time, you know, and so you switch and all of the callings are volunteer. Laura was always playing the piano. Like there's this phrase called the magical Mormons. So all of us are musical to some degree. You know, it's like I don't play the piano, but I sing, all of us sing. And, you know, you both play piano. And, you know, it's like we were like really in. And so it's like, so I think how for you guys was it to kind of when your worldview completely was turned upside down? It's not just the substances that you had to like relearn how to like be in the world, because we've been living in New York. We had friends that weren't Mormon, you know, it's like, so I think it's an interesting thing to think about because for me, I didn't know what I thought about anything. So I had to like really like massively overhaul like my worldview. So for you, I mean, we've talked about this offline, but it's like, but for the listener, like what was that process like for you?
It was really unmooring, like felt untethered, I think is the word that I always think of. Because when you completely lose your all you're like kind of the architecture behind your morality and all of those things. And it's funny because I think my mom once said something about how like, oh well, like if you're not Mormon, if you're not Christian, like why would you do good things to anyone? Like why would like what's your like
What's your purpose of
there's like
morality?
like why do good things, why choose good things? And I was like, well, that seems insane to me. Like I like obviously like there are lots of reasons to be kind to each other, lots of reasons to be good to each other, and a lot of reasons that churches will tell you not to be good to each other. So I thought that was just like kind of a crazy idea, but also something that I never had to think about whether I wanted to be kind to people, but thinking about
other
like what my
things, yeah.
relationships were going to be like, what my relationship with things like, you know, substances, and what my relationship, I really had no clue whatsoever, like what dating was going to be like for me. Like I wasn't something I was good at before when I was Mormon, but it's like something that when I left, I was like, I have absolutely zero clue what I believe in terms of like what goes on in dating relationships. And it was scary, and it was confusing and very strange, and something that I took a very long time to kind of figure out.
I mean, developmentally, we were stunted. And, so like I talked about that in therapy a lot. It's like because, I think there's a lot of infantilization that happens in Mormon, belief for if you're unmarried. So it's like, so if you're in a singles ward and you're, 26, 28, you're still doing the same stuff that you were doing when you were 14. It's like, so you don't really like evolve in that way. So I think like absolutely the dating thing, because so for people who aren't aware, you can't have sex before you get married. And so dating in New York City as a Mormon was really, really challenging. And then leaving the church, like I really, to navigate that, like it was really uncomfortable, and you just feel like a freak. And I think that I often felt like I was like a petri dish, like people were just staring at me like I was some sort of experiment. And I remember like trying to like learn and navigate that, and the inner slut shaming that I would do, and then also just like feeling awkward and like not wanting to tell like the guy that about what I like, that this was like gonna be new. It's like I just was like really, it was just awful. you know so it's like I think there's so much that goes into it, and I don't know, yeah, the worldview thing in a lot of capacity was hard.
It was definitely, I definitely remember there was like a solid 5 years of my life where I was just kind of learning all those things that you probably were supposed to learn from age 14 to like age 30. And it got condensed down, I think, into like a couple of years. And certain experiences, like you actually burn through like faster than others. Like I think like drinking was one of those. I thought like it was going to take me a few years. I was like, I have to make up for all these experiences. You actually can make it all up in one summer, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Like, but there's just like a lot of other things where I think like I was very surprised by the weight of being responsible for your entire life. And that was like such an interesting realization. Just realizing that I was suddenly responsible for everything. And in a lot of ways, it was very daunting, actually. Like being in religion is actually very comfortable in some ways because people just hand you what you're supposed to believe and what you're supposed to do. If you don't know what to do, you just turn to the religion and yeah, exactly. But when you leave that, suddenly you don't have anything really, you don't have that framework with, and so you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for your decisions, whether they or are, what morality are you going to frame your decisions around? What makes you happy? What doesn't make you happy? Or everything is suddenly your responsibility, and it's a heavy weight. I think that it's something that actually even people not in the Mormon church might be able to at least relate to, just coming from something where like a lot of decisions are just already laid out for you. And then suddenly having to make those decisions for yourself is, it's very liberating, but sometimes it's scary how liberating it is.
It's super scary. Yeah. I'll go ahead,
Yeah.
April.
One thing just related to that, I think there was like a lot of grief as well, like leaving and feeling that sense of loss of faith, loss of a structure, but also loss of community. I feel like it was really hard to figure out like the responsibility for like creating a community is like something that you have to figure out how to do when you've had this framework your whole life, when you've had like these people who you are in like assigned to be responsible for caring for and who are assigned for caring for you. When that's taken away and like you don't have like an inbuilt social structure, that was really hard, I think. I mean, obviously like we all make friends through work and things like that, but like figuring like that was, I think I just felt a real sense of loss in terms of community when I left.
That I totally forgot that I had had this huge grieving period, actually. And you just reminded me of that because I had been very attached to also this idea of what my life was supposed to be like in the church. I was supposed to like find someone, get married, have kids, and I was going like I wanted nothing more than I wanted to be like one of those elite Mormons, like if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
I was like,
We all were aiming for that, I
You were.
think.
yeah, I wanted,
Yeah.
and like I wanted to be like a trailblazer for like Korean Americans and stuff like that. And I remember like I was always so jealous of there are like these kind of well-known Korean Americans in the Mormon church. And they're just like, they just kind of sit on this pedestal, or they did sit on this pedestal for me. I just like was, I just admired them so much. A lot of them were like Harvard educated, or they're all very accomplished, but then also like living out their culture and their religion. And I just never fit into that. Like the entire time, like I was in the church, like I tried so hard, just trying to like bend over backwards, trying to fit into that mold. And it was just never me. And so leaving the church, I just remember like feeling like, wow, like I never fit in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, you realize that all of the relationships that you thought you had were conditional. So there was that. And that they actually, most people didn't care about you. They only care about you if you're in the church. And if you're not in the church or you're inactive, they'll come for you if you're inactive. But if you're someone who's an apostate, it's like you're like of the devil. Like we can't get too close to you because you're going to corrupt us. Like I mean, the thing is, like, I kind of briefly talked about this, but I was afraid of losing everyone. Like, and I think that that's the thing. Like, I thought I was going to lose everybody that I knew, like my family, my friends, everyone. But I knew it wasn't true and I couldn't do it. It's like, and so I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that I was going to lose everybody that I cared about, that was in my, that I felt really safe with. And I did lose most of the people, it's like, but I mean, thankfully I still have you guys, it's like, but I think there was that and but I think part of my grief was also like I work in media, and I think that there were a lot of assumptions that were made when I actually was quite progressive. And I think what kept us all in, as long as we were in, is everybody that we knew were also progressive. And so I think, a big question that comes up is, when people are in high demand groups or high demand religions, they're like, how did you not see? How did you not see? And it's like, you can be smart and still be in something that is not like that is controlling.
Oh yeah.
It's like, and I think that the problem is they purposefully try to keep people in that are smart, because then when you give your power away, you're like, oh, this person is smarter than me and they've figured out how to make it work. So if there's an issue that I'm feeling, it can't possibly be that it's wrong. I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. I don't fit. I'm wrong. And so you start internalizing it, and you see other people. And so you're like, I remember we had people in our bishoprics who were really progressive. And so I was like, well, if they can do it, then and you just like turn yourself into a pretzel. And it's like, it's just, so I think when I left the church, I was really also the grief and the anger that I had like been such a defender of the church because I was not judgmental and I was not, it's like, and I had endured a fair amount of persecution and for not, like I endured all of that for nothing, it's like, and for something that wasn't true, for something that actually like caused a lot of harm for a lot of people we care about, you know?
Yeah, I've heard actually I've heard other people who actually serve missions. So I don't think any of us served a mission, but I've heard actually a lot of grief expressed by people who served missions and left the church. Also, kind of similar to that, that they just gave up so much of their time and energy defending something that they no longer believe in, and that's a lot to just take in and to leave behind.
And I think too the shame, like I was 31 and I'm not stupid. So I was like, how did I not know? Like once it clicked immediately. So you guys know, like I left the church because of what happened on November 5th of 2015. So it's like, so the gay rights policy that the church had come out with saying that any child of a same-sex couple would not get, they were not allowed to get baptized until they would be 18, and they would have to disavow their parents, and then those same-sex couples would get excommunicated for apostasy. And for many years I had been putting it on the shelf, so to speak. And it's funny because I hadn't seen the Book of Mormon musical because we were told not to watch it, right? And so I had said something about my cognitive dissonance to, like, it was a friend who was gay and we were talking about stuff, and or he is gay, but he's not my friend anymore. But anyway, but it's like, but I was talking and it was a never mo. And so I said something about, like, when something doesn't, like when I don't understand something, I just file it away in my brain in a shelf and I just put it on the shelf. And he was like, "Are you being ironic right now?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "That's literally a line out of the Book of Mormon musical." And I remember my mind just like being blown by that because I thought that was a Brittany thing. I didn't realize that it was a Mormon thing. And I was still Mormon at the time. So I started asking around and I was like, "Do you guys like mentally put things in boxes and put them on a shelf?" And literally we all did it. And I was like, where did we learn this? And so I was like Googling on the internet because I was like, how do we all have this like coping mechanism for brainwashing ourselves? And we all do it and they hit it. That's the thing. The church is notorious for gaslighting its members. And so they say that things are true and then they change their minds. Like I didn't know half of the racist policies that, like, I really didn't know. It's like, and like, I think, I mean, you guys, like, what do you guys want to say about that? Because it's just like bananas when I start thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think cognitive dissonance is a thing that I learned about in my freshman philosophy class at BYU. They like really talked a lot about that, and I think that was just priming us for a life of people who were going to be educated and trying to square all of the different parts of ourselves and our understanding and our knowledge with the fact that we were trying to stay within this religion that didn't actually square with all of those things. So I think we were taught that in a really like obvious way. Like that was something that they were just like, yeah, we know that, like, we've got like these neuroscientists in the church and like they have to deal with the fact that like not all of the things that they know make sense with the other things that they think they know. So it was interesting that that was something that they, like, as 18-year-olds, they're like, hey, this is going to be an issue for you. And we want you to feel like you have a way to deal with it. And it was like compartmentalizing. And so it's interesting that they were so open about that. And those people, I think, were all dealing with all those things themselves as like full adults. So it's something that, yeah, you have to condition yourself to be able to do that if you're going to live a certain way.
Yeah. I know we weren't going to like go heavy into the Mormon church, but maybe we should explain a little bit of what this cognitive dissonance was, just as like I think that there's a lot of things that we take for granted in these coping mechanisms that we developed over time, but the Mormon church is very like top down. So like whatever someone says in the leadership of the church, that is considered to be direct from God. They are considered to be mouthpieces of God. They speak on behalf of God. And
Men,
so
they're
that's,
always men
yeah,
too.
always men. Yes. And that's not like, It's actually policy that it's always men.
Women are not allowed to be leaders
yeah.
outside of when you're dealing with children.
Yeah.
You can be a
Well,
primary president or like society president.
They can be like kind of adjunct
auxiliaries.
You can
leaders.
lead each other.
Yeah. So what would happen is like anytime there was something that came out from the church that was maybe like questionable, the advice that the members were given was that they were told, like we were always told, like, oh, go pray about it, and if you're having struggles accepting this, you need to pray on it more, and like you have to accept that these men speak on behalf of God. So like a great example was with Prop 8 when the church came out in support of Prop 8. Then it really felt uncomfortable to a lot of people. But I remember at the time, like people were like coming up in testimony meetings saying like, I really wasn't sure if I could support Prop 8, but like I prayed about this and I'm just going to like have faith that I will understand this later. That is, I think, a lot of the things that we would tell ourselves. Like, I don't understand this now, but I just need to have faith that God will open up my eyes later. And that's, I don't know, that was just like, I think like such a weird coping mechanism now that we think about it, because it's like the church will tell you like you're supposed to pray about things, but if you don't agree with it, then you just need to keep praying about it.
Yeah, that there's something wrong with you. Yeah, that it's like you're not either praying hard enough or you're not faithful enough or you want to be a part of the world too much. Like I think like we've talked about this before, like we stayed in the church as long as we did, and that's also why we didn't break any of the like rules, you know, even after we realized it wasn't true, because we wanted to be sure that it wasn't because we were wanting to be part of the world. You know, it's like because they even have in the scriptures, the very elect will be deceived. You know, it's like, so you're like, is it me? Am I being deceived? Like, you know, it's like I knew the doctrine, and I know like when Prop 8 happened, like the line that I told myself was that marriage is a religious institution. So that's why religions are the ones that can decide. And it didn't impact me. And so I didn't think much more about it. I felt a little bit icky about it, but I kind of was like, I didn't know anybody who was gay. I didn't. You know, I lived in Utah and I was going to BYU at the time. And I have a lot of shame about that. So much harm has been caused. You know, it's like, and I think when people say, well, the church does a lot of good, I'm like, you turning on your own intuition is so much harm and damage, because then, like we were saying before, when you have the option to then make all of your choices, like that's so scary when you've been taught to doubt yourself. And so I think when I first left the church, I was looking for someone to just tell me what to do. So I would find other sources, whether that was, you know, people who because I was so used to turning my power away. And so I was like, well, I still sometimes struggle with that. You know, it's like, I think that I heal it. And then I meet someone new who I think knows more about certain things. And then I don't trust myself. And I'm like, oh, they know more than me. And then I do it again. You know, it's like, so it's still, and it wasn't not even in religious capacity. I do it at work too. So I think for people who have not been a participant in a high demand religion, they might be in other avenues, whether that's in politics, whether that's at like a gym that's really close knit, whether it's a startup. Like how many groups where you can't question the leader without ramifications? People get excommunicated in the church if they ask questions. Like there was a former bishop I know who was trying to cause some change because young children were getting asked highly inappropriate sexual questions by random stranger bishops. And there's a lot of abuse that happens. And he was trying to say that a parent should be with those children when they are alone with the bishop. And he got excommunicated for it. It's like, it's ridiculous, you know, it's like, so anyway, rant over. You guys talk.
Yeah.
We're both so polite.
The Mormons
just
are pretty damn nice.
Quickly, just one thing I wanted to acknowledge, because I think when we're talking about how we stayed in the church for so long, and how we were able to be in this place where like we never felt like particularly driven to sin or whatever. Like there was not like those kinds of issues were not the ones that we had to address. I think just acknowledging that, like, because we are straight cis women, like there are a lot of issues that we didn't have to deal with, that like we were, it was still, um, that a lot of people were put into a much more damaging mental space than the ones that we were in. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I know that
Yeah,
we are coming from that space.
I think that's actually really important because that actually is a lot of what led me to leave the church, actually, because I had been doubting for a long time. I think like I was kind of in and out. It was for me, it was not like a particular day where I was like, I'm out completely. It was like this slow burnout where I was in, sometimes I was out, and I was having a lot of doubts. And I just remember though, like I was starting to realize that I did not find people that I was interested in dating in the church. And I was just, experimenting with dating outside of the church, which also, by the way, is a really big deal because just for those who don't know, like you have to get married within the church if you want to like do the best for your family, because that's the only way in which you will be sealed to your partner, and then your children will be sealed to you for eternity, meaning that after you die, you will still be together. If you don't do this, you're all going to potentially, like, nothing's guaranteed. You could be separated after death. So it's considered to be like almost like a selfish thing to actually like marry outside of the church or to not be sealed to your partner, because you're doing that to your children. There's like a lot of guilt around this. So I was just experimenting with dating outside of the church. And then I remember realizing, especially since my parents are from a mixed religious marriage, they're obviously never sealed. So I remember realizing, like, like as a straight, as a cis hetero woman, I actually could marry someone outside of the church and still remain a member in good standing. I would just not be sealed to my partner. But then what was really bizarre to me was, and this is kind of where like we go back to like Mormons kind of like outgrowing the church. Like I when I was thinking about my friend who was gay, he actually was such a devout member of the church. Like we all know him. Really, really still
He's one
such
of
a
the
good
best
human
people
being.
ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
A
one of the
good
best human
guy.
beings,
Yeah.
and was like so devout and honestly just wanted to like be good. And that drove me mad because I realized, like, if he were to actually have gotten married and found love, he would have wanted to raise those children in the church. The church excommunicates gay members of the church who decide to get married. They're expected to stay celibate. And that was like really eye-opening for me to just realize that stark difference in privilege. And it felt so wrong to me. And that realization hit me before that letter came out, actually, the CES letter. And so for me, when the CES letter came out, I was like, it was just like confirmation. I was like, I
Oh, the
really am
November
done
5th
with this.
policy, you
Yeah.
mean? The
Mhm.
November
Yeah.
5th.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
CES letter's the
Oh, yeah.
other thing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that particular person, when that stuff happened, I was like, if you don't want him, you don't want any of us, because he's
Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
one of the best
Yeah.
people on this earth. Like, he is such a good person. And, it's like, I think, like, I mean, that was the thing. Like, we were all progressive. So we were really like, I don't know, God will figure it out. And I kind of, in my mind, how I would rationalize it was, I was like, the leaders of the church, when they die, like, they're old and they're just probably homophobic. So it's like, when they die, they're going to be like members like us. And I think some of us stayed, not that we could have any power because we're women, but it's like, but I think for a lot of us who are progressives, you stay in the church because you think you can make change, that it's like better to change it from within. And but then I very quickly was like, no, that's not going to work. Not for me. It's like, and for some people it might work, but it's like, but it wasn't for me, because like, and that was the thing, like that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like that thing, like I remember talking to members of the bishopric about this issue, and I was like, I don't understand this. Some of the very best people I know are gay. I don't understand this. And it was really, really upsetting to me. And then when that happened, I remember when that came out, and I went to church, and it was like a pin could drop. Like, everybody was silent. and crying, and everybody was so upset. It's like, so I think for people who are nevermos, who not everybody in the church is homophobic, it's like, and a lot of people are trying to change from within. But I think I feel a lot of guilt and shame because of like so many people that, I mean, suicide is really, really big in the church for, the LGBTQ plus community. And it's really awful.
I think
And
that's actually what was for me like the line that I had to draw, because it was like, yeah, I guess I could stay and try to like wait or help make things better, but like how many more lives are we gonna sit on before we're gonna just decide that we're gonna draw a line in the sand and say this is not okay anymore?
Yeah, I think it was similar for me. I think it's so funny that like that one person, like knowing
Yeah.
just how, like
Yeah.
seeing this model citizen of the world and like how good he is. I think for all of us, like that was
it
like
was
a real
really,
like, oh, if you don't want the very best of us, then like,
Yeah.
what do
then you
you
don't want
want?
it. Yeah.
And like it's definitely not about morality at this point because this is wrong. Like this is very clearly wrong. And then yeah, I think like it's so funny that like seeing that was like, oh, this is the line in the sand that like this church does not believe in doing. Like I know that there are very good people in the church, but it it's not about morality if at that point, because you know that this is a good person who wants good things and is doing good things in the world, and you start to see the harm that the organization is causing, and that it is actively harming people's lives. So I think that that's where I think all of us kind of like realize like, oh, this is way more harm than it is good, and like the good that it's doing is it's all qualified on and conditional.
Well, and the good, like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, so many of the like good parts of Mormonism can be found elsewhere. And I think going back to what we were talking about before, like what April's mom had said, she's like, "Well, how do you know what your morals are if you're not like a Mormon?" I've had this conversation with a taxi driver, basically. He's a Muslim, and he was like, "Well, do you think people who are not religious are agnostic or atheists?" He's like, "Do you think that they're good people?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, they're the best people I know." And he's like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I think atheists and agnostics are actually the better people." And he's like, "Well, why?" And I was like, "Because most people, if they are in a high demand religion in particular, they are earning their salvation. They are earning stuff for the past life or for the next life. Like they're earning things for, well, for this is like, so I can get to heaven. I want to reach the highest level. Like for Mormons, you have to get married in the temple. You have to, in order to be saved and reach the highest level of the celestial kingdom, you have to be married and sealed. Like it's all about you live your life for the hereafter and you are doing things to earn your place. It's like, and if you are only concerned about this lifetime and you're still a good person, it's because you're a good person because you're a good person. It's like you're not trying to earn it. It's just because it's the right thing to do. And I think it's one of those things where I try not to judge what other people's paths are because I really hope that people are not judging me. So I try to give people the same, space. But I find like I get a little bit prickly because so many times people are like, well, you must not be a good person or you must have wanted to sin or blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it for a reward. I'm doing it because my integrity is telling me that this is the right thing. It's like, and not that I can make choices for other people. I can only make my own choices. And this doesn't feel right. It's like, so I don't know. What do you guys have to say about that?
I it's I definitely am so much more conscious of my decisions actually now that I'm outside of religion. It's no longer just, oh, I can't take it for granted anymore that like someone told me that this is supposed to be right or something. I have to like question everything actually. And I feel a lot more intentional with my decisions though. And I feel more of the humanity of people also because of this, looking at the world now from this perspective of like not just the lens of religion, but just seeing like all the beliefs that everyone brings into the picture and the moral stances that people come from. it's just made me so much more aware of how complex that is. And um, my interactions are no longer just based off of my interactions with people are no longer just based off of like, what I was told anymore. And it's a heavy burden though.
I mean, it's a hard because our muscles are underdeveloped in that way. I think that we had to learn quick, and we're thankfully we have adult brains who are processing this, so we're able to learn it quickly. But it's a skill that I don't think that many people, and, for a listener who hasn't grown up in a situation like this, like it is going to show up in your life too, because so basically the lizard brain is what this, like, that's what they call what this happens. It's like, so when your identity is so wrapped up in, being part of a community, whether that's in politics, whether that's in a family, whether that's, in a religion or, a startup or, when your identity is so wrapped up in being this thing, this label, and your brain is subconsciously filtering out decisions for you. We make, I think, 30,000 decisions a day. So it's like, so consciously, the brain is like only letting you have access to some of them. And so they did a lot of research. And one of the studies that I read was they had like a New York Times article, and it was a politics article. And they had Trump supporters and they had Hillary supporters read the same article. They both read, like both sets of people or both groups read it, and they both walked away more convinced of their own position. And they're like, well, how is that possible? They read the same article.
I could totally see how that's possible.
Well, absolutely. But it's because, yes, but that's exactly right. Because your brain is filtering out information. So this is why, like, you can never change someone's mind. Like, if they're not open to hearing it and their identity is so wrapped up. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter. Like if you are so like, this has to be my grouping, then your brain, to keep you safe, is not going to give you information that will make you question. So it's actually only 3% of the population has the ability to leave like a religion that they were born into, because it's so difficult because your brain is trying to keep you safe. And so, I think it's really interesting, like in politics, like you watch the debate and it's like, and like, not that we need to get into this, that's enough. That's a topic for another day. It's like, but it's so interesting though, like how you see something that is so blatantly obvious to some and then other people don't see. It's like, were we watching the same thing? And it's like, and to kind of like have compassion for people in this, because it's actually not even their fault. It's their brains are trying to keep them safe. And so it's like, that actually kind of makes me sad. It's like, and I think one of the gifts of being an outsider and having always been an outsider is I feel like it has given me a little bit of more freedom because I don't have anything else to lose. Like I already have had to leave everything I've ever cared about over and over and over. So it's like, it's like, it gives me more freedom, I think, because how many of us have ever questioned? We've had to, like, that's the thing. The three of us have had to, and that's why we're able to have these conversations. I think the church, because, in gospel doctrine, I was the teacher and we would always, talk about these things, and we learn how to public speak. We learn how to talk about these topics. So we already have kind of the language of, philosophy and things like that not everybody does. But it's like, but I think how many of us have been like, why do I believe this? Why is my predilection to this? Is it because my family like is into this? Is it because I live where I live? It's like, I don't think people really think about how their worldview is constructed and how many of the voices in our heads of tearing us down or whatever are our own, actually our own, and how many of them are our parents or society and I think that the purpose of this life is to peel off all of those layers to find out who you are, because we have so much that's put on us, and it just makes me so sad that people like internalize and hate themselves or think that, it's or hate others. And I think so much of it is fear. And it's interesting, like, because we've talked about this before, living in New York, we have access to so many different like ways of thinking and believing and different, like, just everything is just more expansive here. And I think about the life that I used to live and how small it was. And I remember when I left the church, a year after I left the church, I was in Tulum, and I had just done a temazcal with a Mayan shaman. And she was like, leave something that's holding you back, leave it here. And I left my Mormonism in Tulum. And I realized that I didn't feel separate from humanity anymore. And the thing is, I didn't realize that I had felt separate until I didn't feel separate anymore. And I still feel like that's really powerful, because I think that a lot of times people are making judgments and it's to separate, and they are operating from a place of fear. And it's because of they're so afraid of the unknown. And I think about the people that I know who grew up the way that we did, and they're so afraid of everything. They're so afraid, and how much they're missing that is such beauty and love and acceptance. And, it's like eating food without salt, and then you add salt and you're like, this is so much better, I don't know. I'm like rambling. What do you guys think?
That's so interesting. I didn't really think much until you explained that, actually, that must be why I actually feel, I don't know, I don't want to say closer, but I just feel like, yeah, I feel like the humanity of people more now, ever so much more than I ever did before. And maybe it's just because we no longer have that barrier anymore. And it's like just seeing people for who they are versus like through some sort of like belief system is a very different experience.
Yeah, I love the idea, Brittany, of like peeling away the layers to find out who you really are. It's funny because it reminds me of like an EFY song, I think, which was like a very Mormon youth program. You got to find out who you are. But yeah, no, I think when you have this system that you're clinging so hard to, that you're trying so hard to stay within, whether that is a religious system or a political system or whatever set of family beliefs that you come from, I've been in conversations with a family member when we would talk through kind of like point by point these different kind of logical progression of ideas, and they would agree with me on every single point. And then we'd get to the top line conclusion and they'd be like, oh no, but this is my belief system. And so that's so no, like everything else. Yeah, I agree, but no, like this is where we shut it down. And so I think being like tearing down those barriers and tearing down those things, it is really scary not having a set of answers to go to that are your hardline answers, being able to question everything in your life and everything that you believe and everything that I think is both really scary and really powerful. And I love that idea that it connects us more, that we are more ourselves when we don't take those kind of I keep thinking the word crutch, but like when you
It's
don't
like a
take
cage.
those.
Yeah.
It is a cage, but it feels safe, but it also
Yeah.
keeps you disconnected and keeps you separate and keeps you in a limited kind of way of being. So it is. I think that is a really powerful idea.
Yeah. So I have a question for both of you. I think one of the things that I really struggled with for the first few years after I left the church was reconnecting with my intuition, actually. And I'm curious what your thoughts are and like how you were able to, for both of you, like where you feel actually. Do you feel like you reconnected with your intuition? How was that process for you? Because I know for me, like I really didn't trust anything. Like I was very paranoid actually of my own intuition for a few years, just because in the Mormon church, anytime you hear like that voice whispering to you or whatever, it's supposed to be the Holy Ghost telling you what to do. And so if you ever have those thoughts, and a lot of times it's actually just intuition. It's just your brain is constantly processing different pieces of information. Sometimes you're consciously aware of that, sometimes you're not. But a lot of times, you're unconsciously like putting these pieces of information together and coming up with these conclusions. And I really did not trust intuition for a long time. I hated it. I felt like I was like, that's religious. I don't want it. Like I would not listen to it. And I would just actually try to outsource my thinking and like try to like fact find and stuff like that. Try to like find some sort of way to like draw conclusions. It wasn't until actually I talked to a friend who was like previously conservative Christian and left like a evangelical Christian church, and she told me like hey, you know that like it doesn't have to be the Holy Ghost. Like it could just be your own inner voice and you get to listen to that. And that was the first time that I like someone had actually pointed that out to me. And I think from there I was able to reconnect with my intuition. I feel like I'm actually a very intuitive person. Um, and I think it's like probably taken me up until maybe like the past 2 years that I've really, really started to trust myself. But what I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like I haven't gotten there yet. Like I feel like I still have a really deep distrust of my inner voice, of my intuition, because that's how we named it, because that's what we called it, and because for so long I know that it like was trying to keep me within a system that was ultimately damaging. I find that really hard. Like I don't know if that's something that I do outsource. Like I like find myself like offloading a lot of kind of big decisions, kind of talking through them with everyone I know and like checking that because I think I don't trust
Yeah.
it. So yeah.
I mean,
That's like
yeah.
so wild. Sorry, I
Okay.
just want to say that's like so wild to me, April, because you were just like, I just feel like knowing you personally, you should trust yourself so much.
You're so
And like,
insightful. Yeah.
yeah,
You have good
exactly.
instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oops,
know,
I'm just
babe.
gonna be over here for a second.
It's okay, honey. No, I mean, I think that's why I have a lot of anger in some capacity to the church. I've mostly let it go. It's after 9 years, it's like, but that's the part that I'm like, this is why I think that it causes harm because we hurt ourselves. And that is something that is like, they taught us how to hurt ourselves. And it's like, and like, we did it to ourselves. And it's really like, I think that the intuition thing, I'm still working on that. But what I've realized is we are pretty smart and we're pretty calm as generally like how we make our decisions. And I think learning it's so funny because when I was Mormon, I used to play that game where you would take the Book of Mormon and you would, if you're trying to like pray about something and you would just kind of like go like this and then put your finger and then you would find it. I still do that, but now I do it with oracle cards. Or yeah, and it's like, or I'll do it with like a song or where it's like where my inner self knows what I need to hear and your brain will find. So like when people are like, ask for a sign and it's like, you're going to see a red car and that means that this is true. Guess what? The neuroscience is if when you start looking for that, you're going to start seeing it. So whether it's your intuition or whether it's your guides or, whatever it is, it's like once it's really coming from you because you're allowing your brain to see it. And like that's why I really like learning about neuroscience because then you like learn it's like the limbic system that is trying to keep you safe and that is what's informing the cognitive part of your brain. So, I mean, I think that we're going to have to work on this forever. Like I don't think that we're ever going to completely heal this. I'm still kind of learning, but I think that I'm just getting to that now. Like I think that now I'm hitting 40 and after my last instance where I gave my power away, like I'm like that's never going to happen again because actually I have been steering this ship for 40 years. Like I mean you guys know my background. I essentially like raised myself. Like I have been doing this for myself for 40 years. Why would I think anybody else could do this better than me? I did all right. Myself. So I think the concept of intuition is a challenging one, but that's why now I have to stay clear from certain types of dogmatic thinking. And now I just kind of focus on the earth and the cycles of the earth and the cosmos and being, a human being. And I also turn to like myths and folklore because stories are really about humanity and they teach you like the hero's journey. It's about coming into yourself and like learning from within. That's always what it's about. It's like, and I think that kind of developing that skill, we will probably always have to like this is religious trauma that we will always kind of have to deal with. I don't think it will ever go away. No amount of therapy is going to completely make this go away. It's like, but I think that we'll be able to have a better handle on it. It's like I feel like I'm 9 years out and I'm so much farther than where I started this journey. And so I think if there was anything that I could tell someone who's embarking, when I have talked about this, it's like the Matrix. It's like blue pill, red pill. Do you want to stay in the assimilation or do you not? That's only a choice that you can make for yourself. It was one of the very hardest things I've ever had to do. And of course I would do it again. It is the very best thing I could have done for myself. It's like, but it is not for the weary. It is really not. It is the constructs completely being torn down and having to rebuild is so hard, but it's so worth it. It's like, but yeah, I don't know. It's like the intuition thing. We're going to have more podcast episodes about that. So it's like, I'm working on it, it's like, but I think for anyone who is listening to this, who's afraid because they're unsure of what do they like? Everything of their hobbies, everything has been to build the kingdom, right? So how do you know what you yourself like without any agenda? Like you can do it. I tell you can do it. Like we're still on that path, but we're so much farther along after 9 years and it's possible. But yeah, I mean, it's painful still, it's the heartbreak is still there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think there are a lot of things that I think we've touched on this. There are a lot of things that I'm thankful for that came out of being a member of the Mormon Church, and one of them was you, the two of you. Like
we only would have met each other this way. Yeah,
we would never have met otherwise. And I mean, there is a lot of really wonderful people who I've met because of this. I think there are a lot of skills I gained as a member of the Mormon, like public speaking, and to some extent, deep reading. Like I'm a book editor, so like spending a lot of time reading scriptures and like journaling and doing all of that stuff. Like and then thinking about stories and how we tell stories and the stories that we form about ourselves, and how those help us to interpret the world around us and how they impact the way we see each other. I think all of those are really important things that once we kind of learned those skills and then we're able to take them beyond, like we kind of grew out, I think, of the church. I think those are things that I will always be thankful for. And knowing that in the moments when it really counted, in the moments when I was in the right place at the right time, knowing what I needed to know. Like I remember the last few times I went to church, sitting in a sacrament meeting or having to plan a lesson for a group of people that involved dogma or ideas that I didn't fully feel comfortable trying to convince someone else of, and trying to wrap my head around a way that I could teach this lesson that felt true to me. And sitting in those meetings where I was like, oh, these things are not ringing true anymore. Like this lesson that I have to teach to someone else, like, am I comfortable teaching it? Am I comfortable moving this idea into another brain? Like, am I comfortable like reiterating and retelling this story the way that I'm supposed to tell it? And at some point that became an obvious no to me. And so that was one of those moments where my intuition was something that I was like, oh, I have to listen to this. Like I no longer have the ability to stay in a place where the stories that are being told don't mesh with my own morality, with my own sense of right and wrong. And being in that space, I think that's something that I'm going to try and trust that feeling more and find that feeling more and kind of know where that is matching up against that desire to stay, that desire to be in a safe space, like knowing the difference between those two voices.
So we all left the church. I'm a little bit older than you guys. But we all left the church like in our early 30s. I think, Laura, maybe you were 29, right? But about that time. So that's in astrology, that's called your Saturn return. And I once had a tarot reader and he told me that I was always going to leave the church and that at my Saturn return, it was a karmic awakening. And so like I'd already left the church at this point, but he was like, oh, this was always going to happen. And he was like, and so he explained it. And now that I know a lot more about astrology, it makes a lot of sense. So your Saturn is kind of there. It's for one, it's the area of like the father in your chart, but in my chart, it's also like in the house of like religion and past karmic life trauma. And so I now like to think of it as we absolutely had to be born in the families that we were born into. We absolutely had to be born into the religion that we were born into, because life is like a relay race. And in our past life, we learned certain lessons. And then this was to remind us so that we could get farther this time. And so we had to have those patterns so that we would remember. And so I think it kind of gave me a little bit more acceptance and grace about it, because before I had talked to this person about it, I was really beating myself up about it. And now I don't have as much, like, I now know it all happened the way that it was meant to, that I had to have the parents that I had to have the religion that I had, because I had to learn the damage so that I could take it and do something better with it, because I had to be reminded. And so it's like, and I think sometimes when people are in these situations, they really dig in and they stay in, and other people go the other way. And it's like, I definitely am like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. It's like, and so now I think in a past life we probably had similar trauma. It's like, and that's why we're going to get farther along in this one, because we're healing this. Like we had to be taught that this is bad. No, we're not doing this. It's like, so I think for me it gave me a little bit more acceptance and grace, because I don't regret my time in the church. I don't, because it gives me now empathy too for other people. And what I've realized too, like I only had this realization over the last couple of months, but my last name is Ambridge, right? So when I spell it, I'm always like Ambridge, like I am a bridge.
Oh, I love that.
That's really sweet.
I am a bridge, because I am hoping that I can help people to liberate themselves, because we've already done this. So it's like, you can do it for yourself. We're just a little farther along. So it's like, so if we can help you to give you hope that it gets better, that you can, like, I think oftentimes people are like, it's going to be scary. I'm going to lose all my morals and I'm not going to have any friends and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's just not true. The truth is that was an illusion. We thought we had community. And that's when our hearts broke, because then we realized that we didn't have the community that we thought we did. And I mean, thankfully, that's how I found you two. But it's like, but that's the thing. That's why I don't regret any decision really that I've ever made, because it's not, there are no mistakes. They're only mistakes if you don't learn from them. It's like, so if you are able, that's also why I'm like a bit of an alchemist, because in my first episode, I mentioned a friend who told me that was my skill. It's Laura. Laura was the one who told me that. And she was like, one of the favorite things I love about Brittany is she takes shit and she makes it work for her. And it's like, yeah, that was Laura who told me that. And I had never put that together, that's what I do. And it's like, but that's the thing. There are no mistakes, because as long as you can take those things and then you can work with them, it's not a mistake. It's just a lesson. And I think for Mormons, we're like the morality police, even about our decisions. We like second guess our decisions. And they were like, that was bad. We shouldn't have done that. And blah, 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 blah. I'm still working on that. Like I still am working on that. There's not a morale. As long as you're not hurting someone, it's not a good versus bad. It's not that binary of thinking. It's okay, that happened. And now what? It's like, as long as you're not hurting someone, it's like, so I don't know. I think it's like an interesting thing to think about, because I think my purpose of being this bridge is, it's like we're able to like shine the light, but also we've already been through it. And it's like, and very few people in this world have ever really done this deep dive into identity, into what they believe. Now I just kind of am like, okay, well, there are cycles of life and there is birth and death, and I have been reborn so many times. Like, and that's the beauty of our friendship, is how many humans, like how many lives have we had together? How many reincarnations while we've had this body in this lifetime have we had together? It's like that concept of something dying and something being born, and, letting parts of yourself go and kind of mourning. Like I still think about my past self, and I feel sorry. I'm sad, and I'm also grateful because I'm here because of her. It's like, but I'm also sad because I remember that heartbreak.
Yeah. I have so much compassion for like our past selves and just who they were, and like how hard they were trying to make things work. And yeah, it is really sad though to think about it.
Well, it's like I feel connected to that pain still. It's like, but I think that that's also a gift, because I also feel like I now have compassion for when other people go through things. And centering is not necessarily always like a good thing, but I think sometimes you have to use that skill. Like there's good and bad about every skill that we have, right? Emotions, there's good and bad to everything, right? And so centering is in some contexts pretty not good. It's like, but I think in some contexts it can be helpful, because when you can have some sort of compassion because you understand what pain feels like, it's not that it's the same pain. Like there's so much pain that I don't understand as a white straight girl. Like I will not understand because it's not happening to me. It's like, but I do understand what pain feels like. And so even though I might not have direct correlation, I can still have compassion, and I can still try to not judge people, and to also value their experiences, and also know that it's their process and they're doing their own thing and they got to figure it out. I think I have savior tendencies where I try to save everybody, and I got to fucking stop that. It's like, I mean, you guys know I do this, but it's like, I'm working on it. It's like where I literally get involved, and then I sometimes in just by talking, but it's like, anyway. I mean, what do you guys want to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea of pain and like our former selves, I think a lot of people say things like, oh, you can't grow without pain. And I think that there is a lot of truth to that idea, that like not all pain leads to growth. I think that's also a thing that is important to remember. Like feeling pain isn't an intrinsically good thing. I think if you're feeling pain, that's discomfort showing you that maybe you're not in a place that you need to be. And like that, I think, is what spurs the growth, is like the especially when we're talking about emotional pain, especially when we're talking about
in this context.
So knowing that like it's what you do with the pain that helps you to grow. And it's funny because I think as people who are in a religion that really valued journaling, I have some really deep records of my past self on the shelf behind me, and I'm like, they're both terrifying to think that they're still there, and at some point I'm like, oh, maybe I should burn it all.
I shredded mine. I shredded all my journals. I shredded them. Because when I die, I don't want anybody reading them. Oh, no, I shredded them. I was like, no one needs to know about any of that.
It's the most deeply humiliating thing to have someone read like a note that you've written to yourself, like at a past time, to have them read that in a different time, in a different setting. It's like, I've had that happen a couple of times, and it's like the most humiliating thing. So maybe I should burn them. But it is interesting to go back and look at who that person was and feel that kind of empathy for her, and what she was going through, and the mental gymnastics she was doing to try and make sense of the world around her, and being able to see like how she became me and like who I might become one day. I think it's we're all on a path, we're all on a journey. So having grace for ourselves and for each other.
That's so funny what you mentioned about the journals. I didn't even think about that, but like I recently I found all my old journals at my parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I should probably move these. So I moved them to my home in New Jersey, and my husband was like shocked at like the stacks of journals. And I don't even know what to do. Like I got a safe to put them in, but the safe is not large enough. There's like too many of them. So I gotta get a bigger safe.
There you go.
Anyway,
I'm impressed that you're keeping them. I guess I'm like, you both are more evolved than me. I'm just like, no one's gonna know about this. No, I mean, we may get to that point. I just have a podcast instead where I air all my dirty laundry.
This is the same thing.
Forever.
Exactly.
This is a journal right now that we're recording. So, yeah.
I just wanted to maybe put out an idea that just in case like that might resonate with someone. I'm a very like really at this point in my life I'm pretty agnostic, and so I don't know, like I've had a lot of things that have happened to me that were super, super painful, that like I have a really hard time personally with trying to assign any sort of like um, value to it in the sense of like, oh, like I needed to go through that experience. Like, there's a lot of shit where I'm like, honestly, I don't think I needed to go through that. Like so and so could have not done that, and it would have been fine. And like I would like to give us a little more credit where and say that I think that um we're the type where, we like to learn things. I mean, I guess maybe that is a Mormon thing, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people, non-Mormon also, who just, it's very important to just always try to like turn bad experiences, try to get the good out of it, right? That's how we pivot. And um, it doesn't always have to have any like a meaning to it. Um, Sometimes it just happened. Like I've wondered a lot of times, like, would I have changed being Mormon? Would I have like chosen to be not Mormon? And this is like just such a weird thought experiment. Because I was like, well, I got this from the Mormon church. Well, did I necessarily have to get it from the Mormon church? Like I could have learned that somewhere else or whatever. And so it's like a weird thought experiment. And at the end of the day, I kind of realized like, it doesn't matter because it happened. No, nothing's changed. And um, I know, like, for a lot of people who are just grieving and just trying to make sense of their lives as they try to reconstruct it after leaving a high demand religion, um, it's okay if you don't figure out the reason why you went through that and why you're at where you're at. What matters is you're honoring yourself, and that's enough. And everything else, like, it's okay. Like, there's just mysteries to life. It is what it is, and we're here and we make the most of it.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I think I sometimes like kind of what has helped me fix that in my own like that faulty thinking of like that everything has to happen for a reason. Like sometimes it's just like life happens and like we're humans living on a planet and we're just lucky that we're here because it's like kind of a miracle that there are human beings that are living on this giant like ball of rock, you know. But I sometimes will think about like the Sahara Desert and and there's like feasts and famines. And like, I don't think the gazelle's like, what did I do to deserve this famine? It's like they're just like they're just living. They're just living. They're just figuring it out. It's not that there's a famine because the gazelle has to like learn a lesson. It's like it's
Yeah.
just it doesn't work that way. It's like but that kind of helped me a little bit because like when things have happened to me, I'm kind of like, or just it's just stuff happens, but it's like, but and what are you going to do about it? It's like it's one of those things where it's like it's just being alive. The leaves on the trees are not like, I hope I don't get frozen today. It's like it's just that's not how life actually is. But I think that that kind of helps give me a little bit because I think I myself like to control outcomes. And, I think especially when you're high functioning and when you have had no control and no stability your whole life, that's why I think for me, so much of my identity being a photographer. And that's still a big problem that I have so much of my identity wrapped up in my work. But two, it's like the Mormon thing was a big part of my identity. So like when things happen with work where it goes like this, I was like, who am I without this title? Who am I without this job? Who am I without, and then when the Mormon thing happened and I don't speak to my dad anymore and all of these things that it's just like, who am I without these things? It's like, but sometimes it just happens. It's just life. And it's just like to go with the flow of life and the flow of the cosmos. And I don't know. There's this. So for the audience, Laura got married last year, and her vows were so beautiful, and I was like sobbing. They were so beautiful, and it was about like the cosmos, and that like your protons were going to be with your husband's protons, and I was like, this is the most beautiful thing ever. And it's like I just loved it so much. It was just, and I was like a sobbing mess. Like the pictures are not pretty, but anyway. But it was like really just such a beautiful thing. And so I think if there's anything like because I know I don't want to like I would spend all day talking to you about this, but we probably shouldn't have a 6-hour podcast. But it's like, but I think if there is any advice that you could give someone who is questioning or is on a path of self-discovery, like what advice would you give that person?
I mean, I think just connected to what you were saying about things not always happening for a reason, I think that is a really good thing to recognize. That I think assigning reason, trying to find an explanation for why things happen is kind of like the whole impetus behind organized religion for the most part. Um, and I think it can be an easy out for a lot of people. I think it's when you look outside yourself. I think it can be a really punishing thing that we do to ourselves. I think it can also be a thing that we use as a quick explanation for why things are happening to other people. And I think that's when it becomes really dangerous, is when we assume that because, oh well, everything happens for a reason. Like the things that are hard in your life are there because of the choices you made, or because of things that you need to do to learn and grow. And some things are just bad. Like there are bad things in the world that we have to help protect each other from, and that we're not all responsible for everyone's happiness in every moment. I think that's something I really have to learn. But knowing that humanity, we are here and we have to help each other. Like we are responsible to some extent for the life forms around us and taking care of. Like that is something that I believe pretty deeply, is like we're tasked, because we're here, because we have this planet, because we have each other, and because we are in a place where we have a lot of privilege. Like we are tasked with making the world a better place for each other, for the people who are in much worse circumstances than ourselves. For this is getting like very too big maybe, but like we are responsible for taking what we have and making it better. And so in those moments when you are kind of reflecting and looking at the world around you, looking at where you are in your life and where those around you have gotten to, I think if you can, I guess if I'm trying to transition this into some kind of guiding principle for like figuring out where you go from here, um, if you look at your life and look at the things that are there that make you uncomfortable, the ideas or the feelings that are making you uncomfortable, I think if you're just being true to yourself, looking at those things, and trying to, I don't know, maybe journal about it. But if you are looking at those things and able to kind of see yourself and see the people in your life devoid of, a set of religious principles or anything else, and knowing, and finding that way to trust your inner voice and trust whatever emotions that those things are causing you, and figuring out where you can go from where you are right now, like what you really want, what you really love, and what you really desire for your future, and being able to put all those pieces together. I think that will take us all in different directions. I think at different points in our lives, we will want and desire very different things. But if we can try to like take it back just to your own individual voice and try not to let all of these stories put you in a position where you're limiting yourself. I think, no, I'm not sure if any of that made sense, but I think if we can try and get to a place where we're trusting ourselves a little bit more, to find ways to make everything, to find ways to make the world better, I think that's where we need to get to.
I like that. I guess if what's been on my mind in terms of like advice for anyone going through some sort of like big life transition or huge paradigm shift, uh, I've noticed among Mormons especially, or people leaving the Mormon church, that we all go through this period where we're we're just hurt, angry, and um, it's you kind of live out this period where like your life is kind of defined not by yourself, but it's defined by being an ex-Mormon. And it's all about doing the things that you couldn't do before. It's like, oh, I'm gonna try alcohol. I'm gonna like, whatever. Like you just do all these things, right? And that's kind of like what defines your life. And that's an important phase. It's an important experiment to go through. But I want to just say that, if you're in that transition right now or you're considering it, you will actually move on beyond that. And what you're going to find on the other side of everything is just so beautiful. And like, I'm just here to like hype up anyone who's trying to go through that transition, because the world is just so beautiful. And I think like, one of the things that makes us really close as friends is that we actually, I mean, I love what you always say, Brittany, right? We've been friends now longer outside of the church than we were inside of the church. And we are truly friends, not because we're united by that common experience. That is something that we have in common and that we bond over. But I think our connections are so much deeper than that. And I think that life is like that too. When you leave a high demand religion, it's not always going to be defined by what you used to be. And by the way, just as a side note, when you go through that transition, it is okay to not know what you're doing. I find that a lot of ex-Mormons feel this need to constantly like explain themselves. They're like, I didn't know about this. I grew up Mormon and like I'm so sorry. And it's like, okay, but like also like I know people who grew up non-Mormon who like don't know the first thing about like a proper cocktail. Okay. So like so like, there's a lot of things where I feel like people feel like they have to explain this. So it's like it's okay. Like you just ask questions, be awkward. It's fine. Like you will figure it out. You don't have to qualify everything with like, you don't have to explain yourself. You are who you are, and you know what you know and what you don't know. And but like you will move on beyond that to a point where like this will just be like a moment of your life, and your life is going to be so much bigger than that. And it's like, and it's interesting because letting go of this idea of like heaven and hell, it's just been actually one of the most um, eye-opening things for me to live my life in a way where I don't know what comes after death. And so I feel so much more in tune with my body, with my soul, and what gives me joy, what makes a life meaningful to me. And it's not defined by, a religion or the absence of religion. And um, I guess that's just like what I would put out there for anyone who's going through this transition, that like it's a beautiful thing, and it can it will always, or it won't always be the grief and sadness.
It's so much more beautiful than you'll ever
Hmm.
imagine. It
Yeah.
truly is. I think that it's like when you so I'm like really can't see. Like I have a really high prescription. And when I first got glasses for the first time and I could see the leaves on the trees, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what do you mean? You couldn't see the leaves on the trees? And I feel like that's how my life has been, is that it had been an illusion and it was an obscurity and it was really blurry and I couldn't really focus in. And then I got those glasses and the world went technicolor. It's like, and there's that fear of the unknown that I think so many people have, right? But something beautiful always comes out of the void. Like that is what I've learned about the cosmos. That's what I've learned about biology. That's what I've learned about in myths. Something beautiful has to come out of the void. You have to go to the void to create something beautiful. That's how it works. And like, the analogy of a butterfly is something used a lot when healing spaces, but it's like a butterfly literally turns into goo, like, or the caterpillar, right? The caterpillar, it eats and it eats and it eats and it eats until its body splits open, and then it turns into a cocoon, and then its body like goes into goo. There's no anything else. It is goo. And then it turns into a butterfly. Like the caterpillar didn't know. It didn't know why all of a sudden had a voracious appetite. It didn't know what was happening. It was probably pretty scared when its body started to dissolve. It's like, but it turned into this beautiful butterfly. It's like, I mean, that's why I have my tattoo with my snaky tattoo. And, it's like that shedding of the skin. And it's like, who were you really? And like something beautiful comes out of, going into the fear. It's like you have to go into the fear, because what are you missing out on when you are trying so hard to keep yourself safe? Like you're missing out on so many things. And I think that, Exmos always talk about the substances, because I think people think it's so funny when they're like, oh, you never had any of this. And so they like laugh about it. It's really like, that's actually like, I can go without drinking. It's not a big deal. Right. It's like,
it's the tip of the iceberg of
right.
The tiny piece.
Exactly. And it's like just life, and like just seeing humans as humans, and like the purpose of this life. It's such more, and also you get so much more of your time back. It's like we're like so much time. And it's like we're recording this on a Sunday at about the time that we would have had gospel doctrine, which I kind of am delighted by that it's like we had like Sunday church with, Brittany teaching a lesson again, it's like with my class participants, it's like, but it's like, I don't know. I could talk to you for all day. So it's like, I know you have to go, but it's like, I don't know if you have any like final last things you want to say. And I think too, for the audience, if there's a question that you have, please send me an email I have a contact form, and perhaps I can convince my dear friends to come back, because I think that there's more to say about this. And I hope that, everyone is not embarrassed. And, I did a little bit of an ugly cry. So sorry for the video people had to watch that. But is there anything you guys wanted to like wrap up? So you want to say?
Yeah, I think, life is beautiful. Like we're constantly becoming new versions of ourselves. And I think being open to that, and being around people who are also open to that, being around the people who will accept us in all of our many forms. I think we've talked about that a lot. Like the two of you are those people for me. So if you're looking for a safe space as you transform, as you become the new person that you're becoming, really grasp onto those people who make you feel safe, even in the midst of change.
I don't know if I have anything to add.
I know.
To be honest. Yeah.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys for being willing to be on this. I know it's not comfortable to talk about these things on a recording for everyone to listen to. So I thank you for sharing. I think it's going to be helpful, I hope, for people. And, it's like, and, this episode's airing on my actual birthday. And so it's fun that we get to have this like celebration of life of this. And, it's like a time capsule. And, on my 50th birthday, if the podcast is still around, who knows, we can do it again. And, it's like, and just be like, that's one of the beautiful things about our friendship. We've been friends since I was 26. You were a little bit younger. And, I'm now turning 40, and it's like, you guys are so very, very dear to me. And you have loved me through the messy. You have loved me through the ugly. You have loved me when it just didn't think, I never thought I was going to like see the light out of the darkness that I was going through. And I just love you both so very much. So
yeah, I love you too.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
No, I just wanted to say, like, on a totally superficial note, like, I mean, for those who are listening to the pod, everyone in this conversation looks substantially better than we did.
We've all had a glow up.
We've all. Yeah. I just want to say the post-Mormon glow up is real. All right, if you're considering it, I just want to put that out there that it's a great reason to
It's
consider.
True. It's true. It is true. Yeah, absolutely. We're way hotter now.
And since this is airing on your birthday, Brittany, I just want to say happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. I'm so excited that I know you. I'm so excited to get to know all the future versions of you and love you all the more.
Yes.
Now my master.
Thank you for having us on your show. It is such a privilege to be on Beyond the Portrait.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thanks, babes. Well, I love you both to pieces. So
Love you too.
Love you.
bye. Thank you for spending this time with me and my friends. Because it is my 40th birthday, I wanted to answer one question that is a variation on what I would pose to my guests on the show. So what advice would I give myself on my 30th birthday? Brittany, you are about to endeavor on the most arduous journey yet. You will experience extreme pain, lose family, lose friendships, and most importantly, you will lose the illusions of what you thought you knew, of who you thought you were. And I am so, so happy to tell you that it will be worth every part of it, that you will surprise yourself by what you will find, the beauty that you will discover, that the community you have built for yourself, the people that have adopted you into their hearts, your chosen family, they love you because of you, not because you had to earn it or what you could do for them, that you will adopt a special little pup named Margot who will teach you more about unconditional love than you ever thought possible. And best of all, you will find a home in yourself. So my advice to you is to learn to trust yourself and find your power, to believe that what you have to offer this world is so much more than you currently can imagine. And remember that life is precious, it is miraculous, and it is exceptionally beautiful, that the shadows give shape to the light. The next 10 years will bring many endings and so many beginnings, but I have a spoiler for you. You will find your voice. Thank you for spending my birthday with me. Also, for those who are undergoing a faith transition, if you are able, I would highly suggest finding a mental health professional or a support group with certified mental health professional facilitators. I'm a photographer. I'm not a mental health specialist. So our stories are to help you to not feel so alone, but I want to make clear that this is a decision that can impact mental health, and not everybody has the freedom or the support that will be necessary. So please take good care of yourself. And if this is something that you're going through or you think you are about to embark on, please, please, please seek out professional mental health support. There are going to be people that are not trained that will likely want to help to support you, but if they don't have the proper training, that can actually cause additional harm for those that have this type of trauma. So I just wanted to make that clear. I hope you enjoyed the show. As it's my birthday, I would love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That could be a nice little birthday present to me. This is a new podcast, so the ratings and reviews really help spread the word. And one of our latest reviews, so the title of this review is Amazing Interview Podcast, and it was written by Thing H. This podcast is my new favorite. The guests are so fascinating, and the host asks really good questions that gets way under the surface. Added to my weekly rotation. Amazing. I'm so glad that you are enjoying it. If you'd like to follow along with my socials, Brittany Ambridge, across the board, and my website is the same. And then the credits, we have beautiful cover art by Stephanie Brookler and my producer, big thanks to him, Juan Paulini Diaz. All right, well, that's it for today. I hope you will join us next time. See you next week.